All right, everybody. Yeah, let's fucking do this. Welcome to speedrunning the Subnautica 2 privacy policy. All right. 3, 2, 1. Privacy notice. This privacy notice is a summary of our privacy policy. These summaries are intended solely to simplify things, and the full content shall be read as they take priority in the event of ambiguity or conflicts, so be sure to read the whole privacy policy carefully. The data controller for personal information. For the services Unknown World Entertainment Inc. and Crafton Inc. act as joint controllers for personal information. Unknown Worlds Entertainment Inc. is responsible for overall service operations such as game servers, management, and customer support. Crafton Inc. is responsible for operational support such as data analysis and service improvement. The collection and use of personal information. We collect your information in two ways. 1. Information is collected directly from you, e.g., nickname, email address, phone number. 2. Information collected automatically, e.g., device info such as model, OS version, and device ID. The purpose of the processing for personal information. We use your information to operate our services and to improve the quality of our services. This information is necessary for the adequate performance of the contract between you and us, to enable us to comply with legal obligations, and given our legitimate interest in being able to provide and improve the functionalities of services. Sale and sharing of personal information. We share your information to provide you the best in service environment, for example, with cloud service providers. However, we do not sell personal information to third parties and do not share personal information with third parties for the purposes of cross-context behavioral advertising. Data protection and transfer to third countries. We have put appropriate security measures in place, including encryption and de-identification, to protect your information. When we transfer your information to countries and other regions outside of your location, we take reasonable steps to safeguard the privacy of your information. Contact details. If you have any questions about our privacy policy, please contact us at your convenience. We endeavor to fully answer your request in good faith. Contact information. privacy@unknownworlds.com. Address 2121 Park Place, CE 250 El Segundo, CA 9245. Quickly. Good. Those effective date. Subnautica 2 Terms of Service and License Agreement. Effective date May 1, 2026. These Terms of Service and License Agreement, terms or agreements, and our privacy policy apply to govern use of Subnautica 2, which compromises the video game, the game software, associated media, any software associated with the online mode of the video game, subject to any additional terms of service applicable to such online mode, and all other copies of such software. Collectively, the game and any printed materials, manuals, and any online or electronic documentation created for or in relation to the game, and or all copies such as materials, collectively the documentation published by Crafton Inc. Company, we, our, or us. These terms also apply to and govern your use of that support and are related to the game, collectively the services. User, you, or player means the person who uses the game, documentation, or services by installing and accessing or using the game software, installing or access or using the game, or III, accessing the documentation or services. If you are a minor, i.e., below the age of which you can provide the consent of laws of your consent under the laws of your territory, and you choose to use the game, the documentation or services, we must have valid consent from your parents or legal guardian. If you have a Craft account, which can be found at https://accounts.crafton.com/, these terms shall coexist with and shall not supersede the terms that apply to your account, the account terms, to the extent that the provisions of the terms conflict with the provisions of the account terms, and these terms shall govern by By clicking accept, you agree to be bound by the terms in this agreement and our privacy policy. Do not click accept if you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement or our privacy policy. Please note the abbreviation agreement set forth in section 11 and the class action waiver in section 14 below. This requires you to accept where and to the extent prohibited by law, abbreviate on an individual basis. Any claims you may have against the company or games licensors, abbreviation or an individual basis means that you will not have and you will waive the right for a judge and jury to decide your claims. And the class action waivers mean you may not proceed in a class, solicited, or representative capacity. In order to use the game, the documentation or service or specific platforms or device will also be required to accept and comply with all the rules of the external platforms and devices applicable to the game, the documentation or service, including but not limited to third-party platforms, terms of service, and privacy policy. The extent that the provisions of these terms conflict with the provisions of the terms and policies of third-party platforms, these shall govern. Limited license. Oh no, I need to read that. Table of contents. 1. Limited license. 2. Amendments, updates, and patches. 3. Prohibited uses. 4. Accessing the games and services. 5. Ownership. 6. Player-created content. 7. Disclaimers. 8. Limitation of liability. Indemnification. 9. Period and termination. 10. Transfer of terms and conditions. 11. Grievance handling and dispute resolution. Arbitration agreement. 12. Inadequacy of damage. 13. Governing laws and disputes. 14. Class action waiver. 15. Copyright notice. 16. Refund policy. 17. Other policies. 18. Miscellaneous. 1. Limited license. Subject to your agreement and comply with these terms and the company and as applicable, its licensors grant you a limited, non-inclusive, recallable, non-transferable, non-sublicensable right to download, install, and use on one copy of the game on one computer, console, mobile, and similar device, now known or hereafter device such as a device, at any given time solely for your own personal use. The license subject to Section 3F consent to account transfer, the license shall be non-transferable. All rights not specifically granted under this license are hereby reserved by the company and as applicable by the licensors. The game is licensed to you, not sold. What? The license does not give you any title or ownership in the game and shall not be constructed as a sale or transfer of any intellectual property or other rights to the game. The license shall terminate automatically if you fail to comply with these terms. In such event, you must uninstall all copies of the game and the game's software. You may also terminate the license at any time by installing the game software from your devices. Oh, fuck you. Subject to the agreement and compliance with these terms and any limitations set by the respective platforms on which you are accessing the game, the company, and as applicable. Its licensors also grant you a limited, non-exclusive, recoverable, non-transferable, non-sublicensable right to create live to also create live or recorded gameplay and videos that leverage assets from the game, such as images, sound, effects, recordings, and in-game music, gameplay videos, and distribute such gameplay videos on websites that permit others to view such gameplay videos without any charge of any kind. For the avoidance of doubt, you may not license or sublicense your gameplay video to anyone else for a fee or any other commercial use without first receiving a written authorization to do so. You may not include in any of the gameplay videos nor anyone linked to the same web page as the video any content that is prohibited by us in these terms. Any gameplay video must include the following prominent disclaimer either at the beginning of the video or if live streaming near the video in a visible format. This video is subject to the game's terms of service and was not endorsed, sponsored by Kraft and Inc. We may terminate the license agreement the license granted you to create, distribute, or otherwise make a available gameplay video in their sole discretion without notice or liability to you. 2. Amendments, updates, and patches. The company may change or update these terms in its sole discretion at any time to the extent consistent with applicable laws and regulations. Material changes to these terms will be brought to your attention as company may determine in its sole discretion if any future changes to these terms are unacceptable to you or cause you to no longer be in compliance with these terms. You may terminate these terms in accordance with Section 9. Period and termination. Below and you will no longer be able to use as applicable the game, the documentation, or service. You are otherwise responsible for checking the page regularly to make note of any changes. Your continued use of the game, the documentation, or services you've posted under the terms of service, meaning that you agree to the changes and updates to these terms. C. Company may provide updates, patches, and other modifications to the game that must be installed. Must be installed for the game user to continue to play the game properly or at all. Company may, as applicable, update, patch, or modify the game remotely and access the game software residing on your device for such purpose, and you hereby grant the company the right to deploy and apply such patches, updates, and modifications. All provisions of these terms shall refer to the game shall also include such patches, updates, and modifications. The company may upgrade, change, or discontinue or terminate the game software, or documentation or service in full or in part without further notice to you. What the fuck? Save the games. Prohibited uses. Company provides the game, the documentation, and service to users only for personal, non-commercial, and entertainment purposes. As limited and described by these terms, you agree not to engage in the context that violates any of these terms unless such content is expressly authorized by us in writing or otherwise authorized in these terms. Violation of any portion of these terms may lead to a temporary or permanent suspension of any of the accounts you create with us in relation to the game. Collectively, a account. The documentation, the service, if applicable, or your access to the game, the documentation or service. Violation of any portion of these terms may in some instances require an investigation by the company, although company is not obligated to do so or to monitor access or use of the game, the documentation or services. In accordance with these terms, you agree to only use the game, the documentation, and the services, or any part of them, in a manner that is consistent with these terms, and you shall not and will not attempt to A. Without written permission from the company, use, advertise, or exploit in any manner the game, the documentation, or the services. In each case, I can't even use Buxton. What the fuck? In each case, or whole in part, for non-personal commercial purposes. B. Use the game, the documentation, or service in connection with unauthorized software, applications, services, or devices whose use may be illegal, voids any warranty, or lead to the breach of these terms, unless explicitly permitted by the company. C. Without a separate additional license from the company, use the game or permit the use of the game on more than one device at the same time. D. Use the game or permit the use of the game in a network, multi-user arrangement, or remote access arrangement, including any online use, except as otherwise allowed through normal operation of the game, as it is intended to be played or explicitly permitted by the company in writing. E. Make copies of the game, the documentation, or the services, in each case or in whole or in part. F. Sell, rent, lease, license, distribute, upload to any interest server or any other website, or other transfer of any copies of the game, the documentation, or services without the express prior written consent of the company, which may involve the payment of the fee for the account separately and digital assets, or attempt to access or search the game, the documentation or services, or download content from the game, the documentation, or services using any engine, software, tool, agent, device, or mechanism, including spiders, robot crawlers, data mining tools, or similar. What? Why? God damn it, I'm not allowed to use my spider to fucking pirate. damn it. Shit. Other than software provided by the company or other than this. What is this is just spider? Other than other than other than the software provided by the company or generally available third-party web browsers. Web browsers, I mean a spider. I'm fucking lightheaded now. Oh my god. I was reverse engineer, derive source code, modify, decompile, disassemble, or create derivative works of the game, the documentation, or the services, in each case, whole or in part, or infringe any patent, trademark, copyright, or proprietary rights, except as applicable law states expressly permits. In which case, any and all lawful modification, adaptation, improvement, etc., and all copyrights therein shall be deemed assigned to and shall belong to vest and exclusive property in the company or as applicable its licensors or creation. In any event, and all moral rights. These include the right to be credited as the author of the work and the right to object to derogatory treatment of the work. Therein shall be deemed waived, which means you shall no longer be able to enforce your moral rights. H. Remove, disassemble, avoid, impair, descramble, or circumvent any security protections of any technical measures that control access to the game, the documentation services, or to probe, scan, or test the vulnerability of any company, system, or network or branch, or any security or authentication measures. I. Upload, modify, share, display, or publish any information that contains software viruses or any other computer code, firewalls, or programs designed to interrupt, destroy, or limit the functionality of any device resource. J. Remove, modify, deface, or circumvent any proprietary notice or labels contained on or within the game, the documentation, or services. Export or re-export the games of service or any export or re-export the games of service or any copy and or the adaptation of the game, the documentation, or the service in any violation of applicable laws or regulations. Create data or executable programs that mimic the data or functionality in the game, the documentation, or services. M. Steal or publish information belonging to others, including but not limited to personal information or personal data, non-personal information or payment information without requisite consent or license. Impersonate any person, including company, our affiliates, our licensors, or our designated partners, our designated representative, or our employees. Harm the reputation of the companies, our affiliates, our service providers or licensors, or the reputation of the games, the documentation, or the services. So I'm not just allowed to know I don't like this game. It sucks. Blah, blah, blah. It does suck. I don't like these fucking thing. I don't like these terms of service. Post, link to, or advertise, promote, or transmit anything relating to the game, the documentation, or the services in any form through any media that is illegal, invasive of privacy, harmful, threatening, abusive, blasphemous, harassing, torturous. This fucking thing is torturous. Disparaging, defamatory, vulgar, sexually explicit, pornographic, pedophilic, libelous, obscene, hateful, racially or ethnically offensive, or relating to, or encouraging money laundering or gambling, or upload, modify, share, display, or publish any information that is harmful to minors. Take advantage of the company or others by exploiting, deceiving, or misleading others in any way, as determined in our sole discretion. Use the game, the documentation, or services in each case or in whole or in part in a matter that is related to illegal activities of any action that negatively impacts the provision, delivery, or the support of the game, the documentation, or services. As exploit errors and bugs found while playing the game, the documentation, or the services. What the fuck? That's fucking stupid. Violate any applicable law or regulation in connection with your access or use to the game, the documentation, or services. Access or use the game, the documentation, or services for any purpose that is beyond beyond the scope of the game, the documentation, or the services intended use in company's sole judgment, such as tampering with or using non-public area of the games, the documentation or services. The company system of company or its providers, or its technical delivery system of a company and its providers. Use, develop, advertise, trade, or distribute unauthorized programs, including but not limited to any programs that intercept communication in the game between a game and the game server and or between a service and its server, or any unauthorized third-party programs or devices that may affect the game or a normal gameplay or access to the services, including but not limited to hacks, cheats, helpers, bot scripts, trainers, automatic programs, automatic mouse, a mouse with macro function, programs that collect or modify game data by reading a game memory, etc. Disrespect or use offensive words, symbols, or other communication determined by context and in company's sole discretion towards others, including based on their race, gender, nationality, or otherwise. Good. Create nicknames that are offensive or provoke negative imagery. No. Manipulate the game or services in an unfair way, or otherwise access or use the game services in a manner that confers to an unfair advantage or disadvantage to any player, including yourself. Use someone else's account or any other platform account to access the game, the documentation, or services. Use IP proxy or other methods to disguise the location of your device, so no VPN, whether to circumvent geographical restrictions on the use of the game, the documentation, or services, or for any other purpose in a way that violates these terms. Use display, mirror, or frame without express written consent the games or services or any individual element within the game, the documentation or services, the name of the trademark, logo, and other proprietary information of the company, our affiliates or service providers, and licensors. Post or share the same content repeatedly in a way that could be considered spam. Sell, transfer, or otherwise dispose of the game data, accounts, the characters, game items, etc. for monetary gain. Induce or advertise the acts of selling, transferring, or disposing of the game data for monetary gain. Exploit abnormal payment or refund policies to obtain undue financial benefits. Engage in any acts prohibited by applicable laws or generally unacceptable by social norms, or encourage or enable enable any other individual to do any of the foregoing. AI. Engage in abusive behavior such as violent language, swear words, insults, or sexual harassment towards customer service agents, which may cause the agents emotional harm. Such behavior may lead to restriction from customer service. That's good. I like that one. Use any content provided by the company or as part of the game IP, including but not limited to text, images, videos, or metadata for the purpose of training, developing, or enhancing any artificial intelligence or machine learning model without explicit written consent from company. Good. Any action that is not defined by these terms that negatively impact the delivery of the game, the documentation, or services, or that negatively affects other players may be subject to warning or penalty, including termination of the license granted to you herein. Furthermore, you agree that you shall abide by any safety information, security instructions, required updates, or any other relevant notices contained on the game's official websites, in the game's manual, or otherwise associated with the game's documentation or services. The accessibility, accessing the game and services. Oh my god, that was a fucking mouthful. Holy shit, man. This fucking sucks, by the way. I don't support 50%, 90% of all that. Accessing the game and services. The accessibility of the game, the documentation, and the services may be subject to the company shutting them down in whole or in part for any period the company deems appropriate to enable the updates or technical maintenance of the game, the documentation or services, or any other action that the company determines in its sole discretion. The availability of the game, the documentation, and services may also be subject to the geographic location. The company may also make amendments to the game, the documentation, and the service, or restrict access, including cancellation, termination, modification, or suspension of a user's account or license by all or specific users without notice and in its sole discretion. Ownership. The license confers to you no title or ownership in the game, including any in-game items, the documentation, or services, and it should not be construed as a sale of any rights in the game, the documentation, or services. You agree and acknowledge that all rights, title, and interest, including intellectual property rights and connected with the games, the documentation, and the service, and any and all copies therein, including but not limited to any derivative work, titles, computer code, themes, objects, characters, character names, stories, dialogue, catchphrases, location, concept, catchphrases, really? Locations, concepts, artwork, graphics, animation, sounds, musical compositions, audio visual effects, text screen displays, methods of operation, moral rights. So, applets incorporated into the game, and any related documentation. The game IP are owned by the company or, as applicable, its licensors. We do not provide you with any interest but in the game IP, and hereby agree that you do not and will not claim any ownership rights in the game IP except as expressly authorized by us in writing. You may not create works based on the game IP or modify, distribute, or transmit the game IP. If you do not abide by these requirements of this section, we shall own all right, title, and interest in any works incorporating the game IP which are created, adapted, distributed, or transmitted, or in the alternative, have an unlimited and irrecoverable license thereto. Player-created content. Company, or as applicable, its licensors own all rights, title, and interest, including all intellectual property rights in and to any content you, as a user, submitted to the company via the games of services. Player-created content, to the extent that the full title, rights, or interests to player-created content shall not automatically vest in company or, as applicable, its licensors for any reasons. For example, there may specific laws. What? For example, there may specific laws. That doesn't make any sense. There may specific laws in your territory which impacts these rights being automatically vested in the company or its applicable its licensors. You hereby legally transfer, assign, or convey all rights, title, and interest, including all intellectual property rights in player-created content to company if right, title, or interest and to player-created content cannot be legally assigned, transferred, or conveyed to the company. Whether in whole or in part, you hereby grant to company a free, perpetual, worldwide, irrecoverable, transferable, sub-licensable right to use the player-created content, including to modify, adapt, use, reproduce, license, publish, broadcast, perform, sell, translate, create derivative works from and distribute any player-created content for any purpose, commercial or otherwise, in any format existing now or in the future. You also agree to waive any right to claim the company or any company's sub-license use of player-created content, violates or infringes any of your rights, including but not limited to moral rights, rights of privacy, rights to publish. I don't get the moral rights thing. That sounds stupid. Just let me have my own moral rights. Proprietary or other rights, or the rights to any credits for the material already set forth therein. The company, as applicable, its licensors have ownership rights and intellectual I'm sleepy. The company, or as applicable, its licensors have ownership rights and intellectual property rights to the game, the documentation, and services. All player-created content must acknowledge and display the appropriate copyrighted trademarks. Using third-party intellectual property without a license or permission is not permitted. All player-created content must not contain or link to other sources or advertisements containing any hacks, exploits, virtual currency farming, illegal activities, content that would conflict with the game's ratings if applicable, or any other inappropriate content as determined by the company. The company does not commit to any monitoring or supervision of player-created content. However, there may be situations in which the company does need to monitor, screen, edit, block, or remove any player-created content in whole or in part, sent through or appearing in the game, or through the services. For example, if the company considers the player-created content may be in breach of these terms, may cause harm, or may otherwise be required by law. By making player-created content, you agree to these terms and company's privacy policy. Furthermore, you agree to indemnify a company from any legal claims or fees that arise in relation to player-created content. The game is protected by the copyright laws of the United States, internal copyright treaties, and any conventions, the United States, or common law trademarks, or any relevant laws. All rights are reserved worldwide, and the game contains certain materials licensed by companies from other and company, and as applicable, its licensors may protect their rights in the event or violation of these terms. Thank fucking God, I am from another dimension. You can't sue me. The company, and as applicable, its licensors, have the ownership, licensing rights, and other rights to all content related to the game. You may have the limited right to use in-game data, item skins, etc., or similar content in the game solely in accordance with terms. However, you do not own the copyrights or other rights in the game data you possess. You are limited right. You are not allowed to transfer, sell, donate, or attempt to trade in any virtual property outside the game without written approval from the company. Disclaimers. Save as said output in Section 8 Limitation of Liability Indemnification below the company, and as applicable, its licensors are not responsible for any interruption of the game or services, use of the game, the documentation or services, or termination of an account or applicable platform account due to any action or fault of the user or failure of the user's device as applicable. Stop with that as applicable, it's fucking stupid. B. Any action or telecommunication provider that ceases to fail provide the telecommunication service. C. Avoid unavoidable reasons that cause the game services to fail, such as maintenance, replacement, regular inspection, constructions, etc. Save with respect to intention. That's vague. That's very ambiguous. Save with respect to intentional or material negligence of the company. D. Any problems caused by the user's device or problems related to the network's environment. Any information, data, facts, reliability, accuracy, quality, etc. of any content, including links, posted or transmitted by the user of a third party in the game or services, or in the official website of the company or a game. F. Your interactions with other users, third parties, when using the game, the documentation or services, we may at our sole discretion, attempt to mediate disputes between users, but we are not obliged to become involved or become responsible in any way with such disputes. Anything which is the responsibility of a third party, unless they are in the direction and control of the company. H. At any loss involved with making game selection or using the game, the documentation or services, particularly when users fail to receive the results they expect of the game. To the maximum extent permitted by applicable laws, any loss of the user's in-game assets, such as in-game items or downloadable content. Circumstances in which the company limits the user's use of game service in accordance with relevant laws or government policies, or any fees, damage, or injuries arising or related to use of the game. Service providers, including hotspot operators, collectively ISPs, you may use to access the internet or use the game or services before accessing the internet. You should carefully read your specific ISP users agreements, terms and conditions, and privacy policy. Save as set out in Section 8, Limitation of Liability, Indemnification. Below, company and as applicable its licensors, we do not make any promises regarding your use of the game, the documentation, and services. The game and documentation and services are provided as is and as available without warranty of any kind, including any implied warranty of merchantability, non-infringement, quiet enjoyment, fitness for a particular purpose, or any warranties arising out of the course or dealing with the course of performance or uses of trade to the maximum extent permitted by the law. You acknowledge that use of the game, the documentation, and service is at your sole risk. Company and as applicable, its licensors do not make any promises that you will be able to enjoy a continuous, error-free, secure, or virus-free operation of the game, the documentation, or services, or your account. Please note that some jurisdictions do not allow the above warranty limitations. These limitations depend where you live and may not apply to you. The game or services may allow you to access third-party websites or services, and we provide access to only convenience and are not responsible for any content, products, or service available through these websites or resources. You acknowledge sole responsibility for and assume all risks arising from your use of any third-party websites or services. Limitation of liability, indemnification. The company, its affiliates or subsidiaries, and as applicable, its and their licensors are not responsible for any damages or loss caused to you, where such damage or loss is not reasonably foreseeable to you, and where you use the game, the documentation, or services, including where the damage and loss results from the breach of these terms. The game, the documentation, or services may be changed or suspended temporarily and without notice for any reason, including when we decide to end the game, the documentation, or service in whole or in part, in case of system failure, maintenance or repair, or for reasons beyond our reasonable control, except as set out elsewhere in these terms. We and our affiliates and subsidiaries will not be liable to you or any other person in the event that all or part of the game, the documentation, or service are unavailable, discontinued, modified, or changed in any way. The company, its affiliates and subsidiaries, and as applicable, its licensors, do not attempt to accept any responsibility for any loss or any damage or loss caused to you where you are not entering into these where you're not entering into the terms as user or consumer. Any failure, suspension, or termination or access to the game or services or any constant connection with or arising out of a force majeure event. In these terms, a force majeure event shall include without limitation strikes, lockouts, or any industrial disputes, nuclear accidents or acts of God, war or terrorist activity, riot, pandemic. I'm going back. I need to read that. Any failure, suspension, or termination of access to the game, the documentation, or services, or any constant in connection with or arising out of a force majeure event. In these terms, a force majeure event shall include, without limitation, strikes, lockouts, or other industrial disputes, nuclear accidents, acts of God, war or terrorist activity, riot, pandemic, civil commotion, malicious damage, compliance with any law or government order, rule, regulation, or this direction, action, or breakdown of plant or machinery, fire, flood, storm, or default of suppliers, and they are beyond any reasonable control or other acts, events, omissions, or accidents, or any claims brought to you by a third party except as stated in these terms. To the maximum extent permitted by applicable law, the company, its affiliates, and subsidiaries, as applicable, and its licensors will not be liable in any way for any loss of profits, lost revenue, lost savings, loss of exposure of data, any indirect, incidental, consequential, special, punitive, or exemplary damage arising out of or in connection with these terms, the game, the documentation, or services, even in the event of a failed tort, including negligence, strict liability, indemnability, indemnity, breach of contract, breach of warranty, or otherwise, as even if we have advertised in the possibility of such damages. Advised in such possibility of damage. In no event shall the liability of the company, its affiliates, or its subsidiaries, and as applicable, its and or their licensors, arising under relating or in connection with these terms or the game, the documentation or services, including any liability for direct or indirect damages, loss, or injuries, exceed $50. What? So I can only sue you for $50. That sounds fucking stupid. What? That's fucking stupid. Stop that. No. Fucking stupid. The limitations of liability set forth in this section shall apply to the fullest extent permissible at law. You agree that you will compensate in legal terms, and often refer to indemnifying the company, its partners, affiliates, subsidiaries, contractors, licensors, officers, directors, employees, the indemnified parties, and will defend, protect, indemnify, and hold harmless the indemnified parties from any claims, lawsuits, damages, losses, liabilities, and expenses, including reasonable legal and attorney fees arising directly or indirectly out of your conjunction with your acts or omissions, including A, use or misuse of the game, the documentation or services, and B, your creation and or use of the user content, and C, your breach of any provisions of these terms. The company reserves the right to assume exclusive defense and control over the subjects in a matter subject to indemnification by you. Oh shit, sorry. C. These terms are effective use unless and or until terminated by either you or company. Company or user may terminate the license for user's access to the game, the documentation, or services at any time for any reason or no reason at all, without prior notice. Termination by company will go into effect I. Immediately upon the termination or deletion of your account, or I. Upon notice from company. This agreement and any license granted to you by the company to you is terminated immediately when you delete the game software, except as required by applicable laws or permitted by a refund policy set forth in Section 16. Company will not issue a refund for purchase of the game or any downloadable content or any other items lost due to such termination, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, and you will acknowledge that the company is liable to provide a refund for any reason, even if you terminate these terms. You are also fully responsible for any problem that may occur to inaccurate information you provided when registering an account. You are also to acknowledge that company reserves the right to terminate your account if the information you provide is inaccurate. Section 2. Amendments, updates, and patches. 3. Prohibited uses. 5. Ownerships. 6. Player-created content. Disclaimers. 8. Limitations of liability, indemnification. 9. Period of termination. 11. Grievance handling and dispute resolution. Arbitration agreement. 12. Inadequacy of damages. 13. Governing laws and disputes. 14. Class action waivers. 16. Refund policy. 17. Other policies. And 18. Malicious shall survive any termination of these terms. Transfer of terms and conditions. Transfer of terms and conditions and use of the game can only occur as set out in these terms. Thank you. This is very useful. How much more? If a grievance handling and dispute resolution, arbitration agreement. If a dispute arises between you and company, our goal is to provide you with a neutral and cost-effective means of resolving the dispute quickly before taking any formal action. You agree to first contact us in writing and provide a description of your dispute, all relevant documentation, and your proposal resolution. If we are unable to resolve your dispute within 30 days and of notice to us, you agree to submit your dispute to binding arbitration or small claims court as set forth in this section. Please forward your dispute to Crafton Inc., Attorney Legal Department 28, squiggly thingy, 35F.231. T. Heron Row, Gangnam-gu, Seoul, Republic of Korea. Why is this in Korea? Or like China? Hello? What the fuck? I don't know. I don't fucking know. Subject to subsection A. Above, any disputes arising and or in connection with this agreement shall be determined by the arbitration in San Ramon, California, provided, however, either party may also bring the claim in small court to the extent the court has jurisdiction over the claim. The arbitration shall be administered by JAMS or any organization successor thereto. The arbitrator shall follow any applicable federal law and or California state law in or rendering an award. The language to be used in the arbitral proceedings shall be English. In any action to enforce any right or remedy under this agreement, to interpret under this agreement, to interpret and the provisions of this agreement, or to settle a dispute between the parties hereto. The prevailing party shall be entitled to recover its costs, including reasonable attorney's fees and expenses. Arbitration on an individual basis means that you will not have, and you will hereby waive the right for a judge or jury to decide your claims, and you may not proceed in a class or conciliatory or representative capacity. Other rights that you and we would otherwise have in court will not be available or will not be limited in operation, including discovery and appeal rights. If a dispute arises between company and users, company shall faithfully demonstrate the measures taken in respect to the users, including any restrictions of users, and will comply with the result of any arbitration decision. The company has the sole discretion or whether to, or whether to what extent to, but has no obligation to enforce any rights of company or take any actions as stated in these terms. Okay, so I think it's just like, oh, if you did something truly bad, it's just like, I don't think these sort of like the things above here will be like done, but I do think it's just there in case something happens. That's a little more fair, but I would much rather just have it not be there at all, because it's fucking stupid. The agreement to arbitrate disputes is intended to encompass all disputes or claims arising out of your relations with companies, including our respective subsidiaries, affiliates, or predecessors in interest, successors, licensors, and asides arising of or relating to the game, the documentation or services, whether based in court, tort, statute, fraud, misrepresentation, or any other legal or equitable theory. Inadequacy of damages. Without prejudice to or any rights or remedies that company may have, you acknowledge or agree to that compensation by way of damages alone will not be an adequate remedy for breach of these terms by you, because company would suffer irreparable losses if you breach these terms. No, they fucking wouldn't. Accordingly, you agree that a company and as applicable, its licensors shall be entitled to the remedies of an injunction, specific performance, or equitable remedy in addition or other remedies available to it under the applicable law. For avoidance of doubt, company and as applicable, its licensures shall be entitled to an injunction, specific performance, and other equitable remedy without bond or security or proof of losses. Governing laws and disputes. These terms shall be interpreted and governed by the laws and by the laws of the state of California. The courts of the state of California shall have exclusive jurisdiction for all purposes regarding this agreement, and venue of any actions brought hereunder shall exclusively in the county of Contra Costa. Other laws may apply here if you use the game outside of these locations. In such event, the applicable local laws shall only affect these terms of service to the extent required by the applicable jurisdiction, and these terms shall be construed as to make their terms and conditions as effective as possible. You must comply with all local laws to the extent that local law applies. 14. Why do I keep saying 14 why do I keep saying 7 when I read 14? That makes no fucking sense. Class action waiver. To the extent that it is permissible under the applicable law, consistent and for the with the foregoing arbitration agreement you agree not to participate in, including but not limited to a class or representative action, private attorney general action, or collective arbitration related to the game, the documentation or services, or these terms. You may also agree not to seek or combine any action or arbitration related to the game, the documentation or services, or these terms with any other action or arbitration or the consent of all parties to these terms and all other actions and arbitration. Copyright notice. If you think any materials from the game company, branded or branded websites infringe your copyright protected work under copyright law, you may also provide an infringement notice to the company's agent as set forward below. Also, to ensure your notice is effective, you must include the following information: sufficient details to enable us to identify the work claimed to be infringed. B. Your contact information, including your address and email address. C. A statement that you will have a good faith belief that the disputed work is not authorized by the copyright owner, its agent, or the law. D. A statement on the penalty of perjury that the information in the notification is accurate and you are authorized to act on behalf of the owner. A statement E. Your physical or electronic signature. The contact information of the company's designated agent is as follows: Crafton Inc., attorney, legal affairs department agent, 38 squiggly line 35F, Gang, Seoul, Republic of Korea. Email privacy@crafton.com. Refund policies. Except as set forth herein, all sales for paid content related to the game, the documentation or services, including in-game items, are final, and company is not obligated to issue any refund for sale or paid content except as required by applicable laws or as permitted by a third party's platform refund policy. Okay, so it's basically just saying if you buy it on this website, we can't refund you, but Steam allows refunds, so it's fine. Requests for refunds or for any paid content must be made directly to the third party's platforms as prescribed in the third party's refund policy. If requested by the third party, company will review and process a user's request for a refund with consistent with any applicable laws and the third party's refund policies. In case of the termination of your breach of these terms, you are not entitled to any refund. 17. Other policies. A company may use the privacy policy and other policies to cover specific details that are not covered in these terms in order to protect the user's interests and maintain order in the game. A documentation or services. You must be age of majority, i.e. at the age which you can provide consent under the laws of your territory to play the game. If you are under the age of majority where you live, you and your parent or guardian must review and agree to these terms together. Miscellaneous. These terms constitute the entire understanding and agreement between company and you with respect to the game. There's documentation and services supersede all prior and contemporaneous agreement or understanding, agreements or conditions expressed or implied, written or oral, between company and you regarding a game, the documentation and services. If any provision of these terms is held to be unenforceable for any reasons, such provision shall be amended only to the extent necessary to make it enforceable, and the remaining provisions of these terms shall remain in full force and effect. Companies failure to enforce any of the rights provisions hereof shall not be construed to be a waiver of such right or provision. Any waiver of such right or provision will be effective only by a writing signed by the company. If you have any questions concerning these terms of license contained herein, you may contact the company at privacy@Crafton or 28, Squiggle Line 35F 3231, Syrian Row, Gangnam Goose, Seoul, Republic of Korea, Attorney Legal Department. These terms of service has been translated into other language for the convenience of the players. In any case of discrepancies between the English version and other versions, the English version shall prevail. However, Korean terms of service shall prevail for Korean players. Yeah, no. Also the cookie policy, I think. Yeah, the cookie policy is over there. Ooh, wait, well, what is the event rules? Oh, god damn it. Event rules. No purchase or payment necessary to enter or win for sweepstakes. Odds of winning will depend on the total number of eligible entries received, and our purchases of payment will not increase your chance of winning, void when prohibited, or where registration, bonding, or localization are required. The event is governed by these event rules. Event rules and the Subnautica 2 Terms of Service and License Agreement, TOS. Other important details and requirements and conditions of participation of the event may set forth on the page, which link to the event rules, the submission guidelines, and through our social media channels such as Discord, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok. By submitting an entry to the event, you are accepting that the terms and conditions of participation on the submission guidelines, such as the event rules and the TOS. 1. Event sponsor. The sponsor of this event is Unknown Worlds Entertainment Inc., located at 2121 Park Place, Suite 250, El Segundo, KA 9245. Sponsor. Submission criteria. Entries must be submitted according to the specifications set forth on the submissions guideline. Entries must follow the community guidelines and terms of service of the platform set used by the entry. Each entry is associated with the entrant who submitted it. The recorded times of the submissions will be the date and timestamp of the received transmission and displayed in the PDT. Sponsors may reject any entries that are found determined by the sponsor in its sole discretion to be in violation of these event rules. Automated entries are prohibited, and any use of automated devices will cause disqualification. Entrant eligibility. If the submission guidelines require submission through a Discord, Steam, or other account, the entrant must be required to be a registered member of that account system. The event is open to legal residents of all countries where Subnautica 2 is available for all. It's available to who are at or above the age of majority in the jurisdiction of residence at a time of entry, except where prohibited at law. Any additional or stricter eligibility requirements can be found in these event rules and the submission guidelines. In the event of a dispute as to any entrant, the authorized holder or the associated account email address or username will be deemed to be the entrant. The authorized holder is the natural person assigned an account, email address, or username by an internet access provider, online service provider, social media channel, or other organization responsible for assigning accounts, emails, or usernames. Each potential winner may be required to show proof of being the authorized holder. Entrants who are minors in the jurisdiction may participate with parental consent to the extent they are in the game's recommended age rating for the countries. If the winner is a minor, sponsor reserves the right to require price waivers, release of copy in these event rules, signed by the minor's parent, guardian, employers, directors, and office of sponsors, including its affiliate companies. Any agents or third-party entries involved in the administering the event, or the immediate family, spouse, parents, siblings, and children, and household members are not eligible to participate. Event period. The event will take place during the event specified in the submission guidelines. Sponsor's computer is the official timekeeping device for the event. Sponsor may reject any entries that are found and as determined by the sponsors in sole discretion, to be in violation of these event rules. Automated entries are prohibited. Winner selection and notification. The potential winners may be selected through the method specified in the submission guidelines. Sponsors will notify winners as specified in the submission guidelines, which may include in-game messages, direct messages, or email. Depending on the event, entrants residing in certain jurisdictions must correctly answer unaided a time-limited mathematical skill testing question administered by the sponsor prior to being confirmed as a winner. A winner must respond to any notices sent out by a sponsor where a response is requested and required, and provide any requested information to receive prize. Failure to so respond will result in forfeiture of the prize and at sponsor's discretion, disqualification of the winner. If a winner is disqualified, sponsor may, but is not obligated to, award the prize to an alternate winning entry. Sponsor is not responsible for any delay or failure to receive or understanding communication of these event rules for any reason, including inactive accounts, technical difficulties associated therewithin, or the winner's failure to adequately monitor any account by entering the event. Each entrant allows sponsors to use their name, photograph, likeness, voice, opinions, information, biographical information, hometown, and jurisdiction of residence for publicity and promotional purposes without further compensation. Where permitted by law, sponsor may additionally require the winner or any other individuals appearing in the winner's entry to sign a declaration of eligibility, liability release, and or publicly release. Prices. The prices available to be awarded for the event are indicated in the submission guidelines. Prices will be distributed as set forth in the submission guidelines, subject to sponsors' verification of the winners unless otherwise noted in the submission guidelines. The winners will also be sent their respective prizes by a method stated in the submission guidelines, which may include in-game, e.g. via their in-game mail or through the registered email address. The prizes will be subject to the terms of the issuer. No substitution, assignment, return, or transfer of the prize is permitted, except as determined by the sponsor, who has the right and sole discretion to substitute the prices with another comparable or greater value. Taxes or any other costs associated with the prize accepting and use, if any, as required by law, or the sole responsibility of the winner. Fucking stupid. Prices returned as undeliverable or as applicable, not claimed within 15 days WS. Huh? Weird. After the delivery of the notification will be forfeited. Prices are not transferable. No substitution or exchanges, including for cash or of any prices, will be permitted, except that sponsor reserves the right to substitute the price for another price unless otherwise set forth in the submission guidelines. Limit 1 price per person per event. All prices are provided as in without warranty of any kind, express or implied, including without limitation any implied warranty of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Conditions of participation. By submitting an entry for the event, you agree to abide by the event rules and any decisions sponsors make regarding the event, which sponsors or designees shall make in the sole discretion. Sponsors reserve the right to disqualify and prosecute to the fullest expense permitted by the law any participant or winner who, in sponsor's reasonable suspicion, tampers with the sponsor's side, the entries process, intentionally submits more than the allowed entries, violates these event rules or the TOS, or acts as an unsportsmanlike or disruptive manner. Any cheating or defrauding of the event system is strictly forbidden and will lead to the complete disqualification of your entry, disqualification for future promotion, and legal actions for damages incurred from you to the fullest extent permissible by the law. Please play fairly. Any breach of these event rules any of these event rules by you will disqualify you from participating in the event or receiving prizes. Sponsors may at its option disqualify you from the participation if you have previously won a prize or been disqualified from any contest, sweepstakes, competition, or promotional offering held by a sponsor. Any entrant who submits an entry that they themselves did not create may be disqualified from the event. Entries that are deemed by the sponsors to contain material or content in violation of the event rules, to be offensive, immoral, obscene, or otherwise not keeping with the image of the sponsors, fail to adhere to the requirements of the event rules, or that are fraudulent in any way, may also be disqualified. Sponsor staff or its administrators at their discretion may remove or order removed any other all entries submitted by a disqualified entrant, as well as any entrant deemed ineligible by failure to abide by the requirements of these event rules. Intellectual property. Ownership of the pre-existing underlying intellectual property of the entrant remains by the property of the entrant, subject to the sponsor's right to reprint, display, reproduce, perform, use, or exhibit the entry for the purpose of administering and promoting the event and or sponsor's marketing advertising purposes. By participating in the event, each entrant grants to sponsor a non-exclusive worldwide fully paid royalty-free perpetual transferable license with the right to sub-license to reprint, display, reproduce, perform, use, modify, and exhibit, including a right to make derivative works of the entry and material and information submitted and in connection with the event or use or receipt of the prize for any and all purposes in any medium. Each participating entrant hereby warrants that any entrant and other materials and information provided by the entrant or original with entrant and do not violate or infringe upon the copyrights, trademark rights of policy, publicity, moral rights, or other intellectual property or other rights of any person or entity, and do not violate the rules or regulations if the entry or information or materials provided by entrant contain any material or element that are owned by which are not subject to the rights of third parties, entrant registrations he or she has obtained. Fuck yeah. Fuck you. I'm non-binary. Prior to submissions or the entry and information of materials, any and all releases and consents necessary to permit use and exploitation of the entry and information and materials by sponsor in a manner set forth by the event rules without additional compensation. Okay, but I'm asking a single thing from all of this. Change this to he, she, or they. Or just like entrance represents they. Just change that to they, because that's more. Each entrant warrants and represents as follows for any entry and other materials and informations provided by the entrant related to participating in the events. Entrant content. A. Except with respect to the sponsor's intellectual property, entrant owns all rights to where do I lost it. Each entrant warrants and respects follows for any entry or the materials and information provided by the entrant related to participating in an event. Entrant content. A. Respect with the content sponsor's intellectual property. Entrant owns all rights to the entrant's content property, and all entrant content constitutes original works of authorship of entrant. B. Entrant content does not violate or infringe upon the copyright, trademark, or other proprietary right of any other person or entity. God damn it. Entrant content does not violate any rules or regulations. And D. Entrant content does not contain information considered by the entrant or any third parties to be confidential. Entrant agrees that sponsor has the right to verify the ownership and originality of all entries. Entrant understands and acknowledges that in the event an entry is selected to be a winning entry, and entrant's ownership and originally the entrant cannot be verified to the satisfaction of the sponsors, or is any in any other way ineligible, sponsors may select an alternate winner, except to the extent prohibited by law. Entrant waives the right to benefit any moral rights or droits moral or similar rights in any country to entrant content other than for the sole and limited purpose of participating in the event. These event rules grant no license, permission, or rights to use the sponsor's content, game content, or any sponsor's intellectual property or or other purpose whatsoever. Disclaimer, release, and limit of liability. Sponsors make no representative or warranties of any kind, express or implied, regarding any prize of her participation in the event. By entering an event, receipt, or any prize, each entrant agrees to the release of harmless sponsors and their subsidiaries, affiliates, suppliers, distributors, advertising event agencies, event platforms, providers, prize providers, and each of their respective company, parent companies, and each of the company's officers, directors, employees, and agents, collectively the released parties, from and against any claim or cause of action, including but not limited to personal injury, death, or damage to or loss of property arising out of participation in any event or receipt or use in any event or receipt or misuse of any prize. The released parties are not responsible for 1. Any incorrect or inaccurate information, whether caused by entrants, printing errors, or any of the equipment or programming associated with or utilized in an event. 2. Technical failures of any kind, including but not limited to malfunctions, interruptions, disconnections in a phone line or network hardware or software. 3. Unauthorized human intervention in any part of the entry process or the event. 4. Technical or human error which may occur in the administration of the event or the processing of entries. Or 5. Any injury or damage to persons, data, or property which may be caused directly or indirectly, in whole or in part, from entrant's participation in the event or receipt of misuse of any prize. If for any reason an entrant's entry is confirmed to have been erroneously deleted, lost, or otherwise destroyed or corrupted, entrant's sole remedy is another entry in that event prohibited that is not responsible for the award, and another entry due to the discontinuance of the event or any part of it for any reason. Sponsors at his discretion may elect to hold a choosing from among all eligible entries received up to the date of discontinuance for any and all promises herein. In the event, sponsors is prevented from continuing with the event as contemplated by the event by its control, but not limited to fire, flood, earthquake, explosion, labor dispute, or strike, act or God, or public enemy, or any federal, state, or local government law, order, or regulation, or other cause by not reasonably within sponsors' control, each a force major event or occurrence. Sponsors shall have the right to modify, suspend, or terminate the event's invalidity or enforceability of the provision of the forces of these rules shall not affect the validity or enforceability of any other provisions. Governing law and jurisdiction. Entrants agree to not be bound by these event rules and decisions, by the decisions of the sponsors, which are final and binding in all respects, to the extent permitted by applicable laws. These event rules and events shall be governed by and construed under the laws of the state of California, and any disputes arising out of or in connection with the agreement shall be resolved individually without resort any form of class action and finally settled in the arbitration of Los Angeles, California. The arbitration shall be administered by JAMS or any organization successor thereto. The arbitrator shall follow any applicable federal law and California state law in rendering an award. The remedy for any claim shall not be limited to damages, and in no event shall be any party entitled to recover punitive, exemplary, consequential, or incidental damages, including attorney's fees or other such related costs for bringing a claim, or to resign disagreement or seek injunctive of equivalent belief. 11. Personal information. Entrants may be required to provide personal information during the course of the event, such as the username, email, Subnautica 2 related platform ID, Steam account information, in-game name, and or social media handles. This information will be used to promote and administer the event. Contact winners, deliver price, and others and otherwise specified in the sponsor's privacy policy at is this just that one? Yeah, that's just the privacy policy. Without limiting the rights of the sponsor under its privacy policies available with regard to the use of personal information by participating in the event, entrance or consenting to the collection, use, or processing of the personal information as set forth in the event rules and the privacy policy mentions above, as well as any further processing of personal information willingly provided by the sponsor during an entrance participation in the event. Languages. These event rules may be made in multiple language versions. In the event of the dispute of the terms in different language versions, the English version shall prevail. No affiliations with social media channels. The event is in no way sponsored, endorsed, or administered by or associated with any of the social media channels used in connection with the event. Rights reserved. Sponsors reserve the right to cancel, change, or suspend the event if cheating or other extenuating circumstances affect the fairness or integrity of the event. This right is reserved whether the circumstances are due to human or technical error. If a solution cannot be found to restore the integrity of the event, we reserve the right to select winners from among all eligible entries received before we had to cancel, change, or suspend any or all of the event. Winners list. To the extent applicable or legally required, you may submit a request for winners or by sending a self-addressed stamped letter containing a requested and or the event name to the Unknown Worlds Entertainment Inc. Legal Department 2121 Park Place Suite 250 El Segundo KA 9250 245. This letter must be postmarked within 6 weeks of the expiration of the event period for the applicable event. 16. Miscellaneous. In the event of any inconsistency between these event rules and the submission guidelines, the submission guidelines will control, but only to the extent of that inconsistency. Sponsors reserve the right to change the event rules at any time in sole discretion, and to suspend or cancel the event or entrance participation in the event should viruses, bugs, or unauthorized human intervention or other causes beyond sponsors' control affect the administration. Security or proper play of the event shall sponsor otherwise become, as determined by its in its sole discretion, incapable of running the event as planned. Entrants who violate these event rules, tamper with the operation of the event, or engage in any conduct that is detrimental or unfair to the sponsor, event, or any other entrant in each case shall be determined in its sole discretion or subject to disqualification from the event, from entry into the event. Sponsors reserve the right to lock out a person whose eligibility is in question, or who have been disqualified or otherwise ineligible to enter the event. All decisions by sponsor are final. If you do not agree with these terms and conditions of these event rules, please do not enter the event. For any feedback or questions regarding these event rules, the event's prize or winners, you can contact the sponsor at the Subnautica 2 Help Center. Cookie policy. Why is that so much thicker? Cookie policy. Craft Inc., we, our company, or us, establishes and discloses the following cookie policy to provide information on how to use cookies in the process of providing all services such as website and application services. What are cookies? Types of cookies, use of analytic platforms, how to manage the cookie settings, detailed cookie information by type, contact information of the Chief Privacy Officer, CPO. What are cookies? We use similar technologies such as cookies to store and retrieve information about you or user from time to time to analyze and evaluate how you use our services, identify demands such to improve our services and products, and provide efficient services. Cookies are very small text files that are transmitted and stored by the users by the server used to operate the services or to your computer, mobile device, etc., and are used to help you use the various functions provided by the services. Similarly, we may track how you use our services through the SDK to improve our services while operating the services. 2. Types of cookies. The cookies we process generally do not collect or access information that directly identifies an individual, such as your name or email address. But some cookies may be linked to your account or personal information. We may use these cookies to perform analytics or personalization. The types of cookies by us are as follows. 1. Essential cookies. Essential cookies are cookies that are absolutely necessary for operating the services and are used to enable you to access the content you have requested to detect malicious activities that may occur while using the service. This type of cookie is always active to ensure functionality and smooth use of services. 2. Functional cookies. Functional cookies are used to check your preferences and enable certain features or options to increase the usability of your services. For example, we may check your language settings so that we can provide service in your preferred language. Also, when you use the certain features such as filing out or submitting forms, we can make it easier to fill out. This type of cookie may be disabled based on your choice. However, if you do this, you may need to modify or manually enter certain information or preferences each time you use the services. 3. Analytic cookies. Analytic cookies are used to understand how you navigate and use the services. We may analyze and evaluate or study these cookies to understand and improve the needs of the service. However, this type of cookie does not collect or access information that directly identifies an individual, such as your name or email address, and are used in the agreement or quantified manner. This type of cookie can be disabled based on your choice. Use of analytic platforms. We collect and use first-party and third-party cookies in the services. It operates and improves the service and viewer experience. We use the analytic services provided by the analytic platforms. Confirm the names of the following analytic platforms and what we use and how they manage data collection. Google Analytics. https //tools.google.com/dl/page/gay-opt-out. How to manage cookie settings. You have the right to choose whether or not to install cookies. Confirm how to manage cookie settings. When using web pages, you may allow all cookies by setting check each time a cookie is saved or refuse to save all cookies. However, if you refuse to install cookies, you may have difficulty using the web services. How to do the settings in Microsoft Edge. Select in more ... in the upper right corner. Manage and delete cookies on site data. In the cookies and site permissions menu, select internet options. In the menu, select in the personal information tab, disable in how to manage cookies. How to do the settings in Chrome. Select more in the upper right corner. Select tracking protection in privacy and policy. Then click disable cookies. How to do settings in Chrome mobile. Privacy and security. Select internet usage history. How to do the settings in Safari. Disable all cookies. When using the services through a mobile device, you can allow or disable collections or advertising identifiers through device services. How to do the setting in Android OS. Security and privacy. Other privacy settings. Reset or delete advertising ID. How to do the settings in iOS. Privacy and security. Allow or disable app tracking. You can change the default cookie settings and configurations at any time through the cookie settings and the bottom of the web page. Detailed cookie information by type. Confirm the following detailed cookie information by type. However, while we try to provide up-to-date information on the cookies collected and used by the first party, or third party, this information may change time to time. 1. Essential cookies. Name of cookies. Upon consent session. Cookie group. Subnautica.com. Subnautica.com. Cookies used. First party. Retention period. First 1 year session. 2. Functional cookies. Name of cookies. I-18N redirected. Cookie group, Subnautica.com. Cookies used, first party, retention period, 1 year. 3. Analytic cookies. Name of cookies _ga _gcl_au _fbtp _clck. Cookie group, Subnautica.com, 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 Subnautica.com. Cookies used, first party, first party, first party, first party. Retention period, 1 year, 1 month, 1 year, 1 month. 6. Contact information of the Chief Privacy Officer, CPO. We designate the Chief Privacy Officer who is in charge of opinions and requests for personal information. If you have any questions about the policy or this website, you can contact us at the following contact informations. Chief Privacy Officer, name Sukbum Hong, name of the department, security team, contact information, privacy@crafton.com, 1566-3771. Addendum. This policy is effective from 26.5.1. This policy has been translated into other language for your convenience. In any case of any discrepancies between the Korean version and the other versions, the Korean version shall prevail. How do I turn it off? There. I did it. Look at that. I'm so cool. Thank you. Bye.